What up, everybody? It's your boy, Anime Sean, back at it again. And this time, I'm trying to talk to y'all about some Dandadan. Yeah, this latest season of Dandadan, season 2, was popping. It was lit. And, Dandadan out here performing, doing this thing like always. And so, this last season of Dandadan has been pretty crazy. So, really, we're just going to go over the highlights of what's been happening thus far. Now, at the beginning of season 2 of Dandadan, we pick right back up with the Kito family at that house and at the hot springs. And so Momo's at the hot springs with those weird, creepy guys that are there. And then Okarun and Gigi are at the house with all the weird ladies. And so Momo is being attacked by the weird guys, and she evades them and escapes from them. And then she ends up running back and end up convening back with Okarun and Gigi and finds that they're being harassed by the evil Kito ladies. And they end up throwing them into the basement with all those talismans that were on the wall in the room. And so when they all fall down to this basement room area, they come across this giant worm monster that's down there. And it's a spirit that has been trapped down there for over hundreds of years. And the Kito family apparently are supposed to be the safekeepers of this village area that has been thwarting the monster away. And what they've been doing, they've been sacrificing somebody every so often in order to keep that evil monster at bay. And so Okarun, Momo, and Gigi, they come across it, and then they have to try to find a way to defeat it. And this worm monster is sending off these brainwaves that are like messing with them. But when Evil Eye comes up and about, Evil Eye ends up like canceling out what that worm is doing. And then Evil Eye, its whole thing is that its aura, whatever it does when it's in the room, it makes everybody around it wants to kill themselves. And so Gigi has had some encounter with the Evil Eye before for some reason. I don't know why, like it like gravitates towards him. But Gigi ends up he's the only one that's not affected by this. So he's trying to go and he's getting Okarun and Momo and trying to get them out there, trying to get them to not kill themselves. And then they finally escape. They get to a room to where they can be safe. And then for some reason, there's just like this, I don't know, this noise that's being made, but it's attracting Gigi. Well, apparently it's the Evil Eye. He's trying to talk to him. So Gigi is like, all right, I'm going to come and try to find you. I hear this noise. Where are you at? Goes all the way down to the very bottom of like this room basement deal where that evil worm is trapped at. And so he opens the room, he goes inside, and then there's just like, old body that's like decades old, right? And so he starts to try to talk to her because he hears this voice and he touches it, and then he ends up seeing this flashback of like this person's past. And this kid was being picked on and bullied, and all they wanted to have was a friend to play with, and he was looking out this shack seeing all the other kids play, and it was never invited, could never play. And then that kid ended up dying because the Kito family ended up sacrificing him to the worm. And so that kid ended up getting resentment over time, and then so ended up turning into this Evil Eye. And so Gigi was feeling bad for it, so his behind was like, oh, I'll be friends with you, I'll play with you forever. And then so in doing that, the Evil Eye ends up taking him over. And so Gigi then ends up becoming the Evil Eye. So with that being said, now Okarun and Momo, they got to try to fight this Evil Eye. The Evil Eye is just too powerful, too strong, and they have to find a way, but they end up being able to get out because Okarun ends up being able to clash with the Evil Eye. They start fighting, and they have that altercation, and Evil Eye is obviously stronger than Okarun, but Okarun gets lucky enough to be able to land a hit that's able to knock out Evil Eye. And so once he knocks out Evil Eye, he then goes to rescue Momo and throws her out of the room that they end up being trapped in. So he throws her height enough up so then that she can escape and so that she can go and try to get some help. So Momo goes and she gets help, and she ends up getting the fire department. And when the fire department comes, she's trying to tell them everything that's going on between the monster that's in the house, the evil Kito family that's living here, what they've been doing. And of course, the fire department, they just look at her like she's crazy. They don't believe it because why would you? So with that being said, Momo ends up grabbing the hose from the fire department to try to put out the fire. And then she ends up grabbing the monster itself. So the water, it like brings up the worm monster, like it's drowning it or something, and then the monster, it appears above the surface. So then from there, Momo ends up grabbing it and ends up taking out that worm monster herself. So she's pretty goated for that. Momo's pretty goated for that. She's actually one of my favorite characters out of the show so far. So I would say actually she's my top favorite. Momo's my top favorite, and then Okurin is after that, and then not Gigi but Granny. Granny's what's up. And so after Momo defeats the worm monster, a little bit later, her granny ends up showing up on the scene. And so they go down and they get Okurin and they get Gigi because they're still knocked out from the previous battle. And so they bring it back to the house, to the home base, so to say. And then so from there, Gigi is trying to learn how to control his chi so then that he can essentially control Evil Eye. And meanwhile, while they're all staying at Granny's house and Gigi's trying to learn how to control his chi so he can control Evil Eye, everybody within the group, Momo, Okurin, and I forget the other girl's name with the pink hair, but they all end up staying at Granny's house so then that they can all watch over Gigi pretty much. And they all have to carry these warm containers of water, hot containers of water, because every time cold water touches Gigi, he ends up transforming to Evil Eye like that. It just switches him, so he's not able to control it. So they all keep a thing of hot water on him, so if he does ever turn, then they could just spray him real quick or throw it on him so he can revert back to normal. And while they're going through this phase, it's very touch and go because anything can really trigger Gigi because there's a lot of cold water around everywhere. A bottle of water, getting in the shower before it actually gets hot. So there's just too much. It's too sketchy in order to keep doing it this way. So Okurin, he's feeling a certain type of way about it. He's like, he's a danger to us all. He's hurt Momo, and I don't like that. So we got to figure something out. So goes and he ends up training with Turbo Granny, and Turbo Granny ends up bringing him to a school with a bunch of ghost-like musical figures. So like Beethoven and Mozart and things like that. So they got to try to fight these spirits so then the Okurin can get stronger and learn more of his power. So after Okurin goes through his training arc, so to say, he ends up going back to the compound where everybody's staying out with Granny, and he confronts Gigi, or really Evil Eye, saying that he's going to take care of Evil Eye right here and now, so then that he can stop hurting his friends, so that Gigi can live a normal life. He said he's going to take care of it right now because he's tired of having to wait until they have a thing of hot water on them in order to keep Evil Eye in check. So with that being said, he has the pink hair girl, have a thing of cold water, and he says, when I say go, throw it on him, so then I can go ahead and take care of Evil Eye right here and now. So he says go, she gets the water, pours it on Gigi, boom, he turns to Evil Eye again, and then they get to scrapping like that. And so they're in there, they're doing their thing, they're going back and forth, they're doing their exchanges, and Evil Eye is, of course, he's still more of a match than Okurin, but Okurin definitely stepped up his game, and then he ended up learning this technique, or I don't even want to say if it's a technique, but it's a point where he goes all out. And so when he goes all out, he goes super fast. It's probably max speed, and he goes straight into the opponent. So he goes straight into to Evil Eye, and he crashes, dude. He crashes Evil Eye and does big damage. And so when he does that all out move, that's it. That's all that's left in Okurin's tank. So Evil Eye actually ends up getting back up from that attack, and he's surprised that it actually hurts him. So he's excited. He's ready to keep going. And he's like, hey, let's keep going. Let's go. But Okurin's like, nah, this is it. That's all going to be for today. And so Okurin starts playing to his psychology a little bit because he recalls from what Gigi had told him before, how Evil Eye is pretty much just a kid that's looking to play. So Okurin leans into that, and he tells Evil Eye that he'll fight him whenever he wants, only at specific times, and that he can only fight Okurin. So in doing this, he's able to get Evil Eye to stop hurting everybody around him, to stop hurting his friends, and to give Gigi essentially a normal life again until he can actually control his chi to control Evil Eye himself. So he's killing a few birds with one stone. And so a good way in order to do it, because Okurin, he wasn't ready in order to beat Evil Eye yet. Evil Eye is still stronger than him, but it gives him time to keep leveling up by keeping everybody safe as well. So I like the way that they did that. And then after they get Evil Eye under control, they the gang gets all together and they fix up the house to bring it back to normal because they destroyed Granny's house. So they get the house back to normal, and then from there they end up moving on, going back to school. Things are kind of getting normal, and then there's this weird kid that's in their class that they have just been ignoring this whole time. And when I say weird, he's just a nerdy guy that was essentially like Okurin, an outcast, but he's been seeing Okurin hang out with Momo a lot lately, and he's just like, how in the world is he doing it? Because Momo is supposed to be the hottest girl in school, and Okurin is supposed to be this nobody, no name loser, and for some reason they're hanging out all the time, and he's like, how are you doing it? How can I be like you? And so he keeps trying to stalk him and try to see exactly what he's doing. He's trying to get the play-by-play so then that he can end up being like that too. But as this kid keeps on following Momo and Okurin, he ends up overhearing a conversation where they're talking about how they got a lead on finding Okurin's other ball. They find his other ball, and so they go into this random apartment complex, and the guy follows Momo and Okurin to this apartment complex, and he's trying to see what they're doing and how they're hanging out after school. And then so he ends up seeing them coming across this floating testicle that's in the air, and then so Momo and Okurin, they're going out for the flying testicle because they got to get it back. Of course, that's the main focus of the story, and then he's running in after him, and so he ends up seeing them use their powers and things like that, and it doesn't really faze him like that. He just kind of jumps right into the action, and so he's actually the one that comes up with the idea that the fact that the person that or the thing that they're chasing is using some type of camouflage mechanism, in that if they were able to remove it, then they can actually see the target. And so the plan works. They're able to remove that camouflage stuff, and then when they finally see who the culprit is, comes out, it's this kaiju monster that's under there. Of course, it's a kaiju monster because Dan, it gets weird. So they find out it's the kaiju monster. The kaiju, it starts off as a smaller being, but then it ends up just growing exponentially into a freaking giant. And then it just slams into the apartment complex that they're in. And then from there, we see them all, they're running away, trying to get out of the way. And everybody in the crew comes up because now the pink hair girls end up showing up now. And then they're all trying to figure out what's going on. And then they still have some tech from the alien that helped them fix our grandma's house or Gma's house. And then when they use that technology, since it's able to use your imagination, they ended up just making this giant Gundam. And so when they make the giant Gundam, they're struggling at first because it's using each of their combined willpower, and everybody is thinking of different ways of how to try to use it, and so they're just fumbling at first, but they finally get it together. And it's actually the weird kid that they just ended up finally meeting here is the one that actually is able to overcome the Gundam and actually take control. And then since he's been a giant weeb this whole time, he's always had imaginations of using Gundam. So when he was actually able to get control of it, he was starting to go ham. He was going beast mode. He was over here knocking out this kaiju, hitting him left and right with all these different moves and stuff like that. And so they were going in, and then they were finally able to beat the kaiju monster. So they finally landed that last attack on the kaiju. And then when they did, knock the kaiju back, kaiju fell on the ground, and then it ended up splitting open. And then when the kaiju split open, Okurin ended up going over there to the kaiju, looked inside, and apparently it's this girl that's inside of the kaiju. And then the girl it's like she's unconscious, but then she ends up waking up, sees Okurin, the first thing that she sees, and then as soon as she sees him, she just gets up, and then she ends up kissing him. And then once she kisses him, of course, Momo comes out of nowhere, sees them kissing, and she's like flabbergasted, like, what's going on? And then the season ends right there. Boom. So that was Dandadan season 2. A bunch of different stuff was happening, but again, I want to go over the highlights with everybody because it was a pretty crazy season, and I got a lot out of it. It was really enjoyable, and the acting was good. It was funny. It had good moments in there, so I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm definitely looking forward to season 3. And as always, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section. So please leave a comment. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know what you guys want to hear about or talk about next. And I appreciate you all for coming and watching the video. Please don't forget to like, and see you guys next time. Peace.